Well, welcome to the show, Rich. It's really great to have you today.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
So now, Rich, part of your background, I mean, tell me, this is one of the fascinating areas I find is kind of what is ad fraud? Is it really there? Something that I need to be concerned about, or is there just a lot of hype about it? Me as a business owner or consumer of these services, how really bad is it? So wanted to get your take on it.
Sure. So the best way to describe it is look at it from a global standpoint. Last year, I believe the numbers is still coming in. I think last year, as a global society, we spent about $750 billion in digital marketing, and roughly 160 billion of that was lost to fraud. So
Wow.
you're looking at almost one in every $4 spent in digital marketing doesn't have a real audience behind it. So you're spending money that's never going to convert. It's never going to drive real, pipeline revenue. It's not going to do anything for your business other than support a group of fraudsters.
Yeah. And it just kind of really leaks off your power. So how do these fraudsters work? How do they make money? How do they create an account? Because you don't hear too much of this in the cybersecurity world, but now it's really starting to leak over. So how do they go about monetizing this?
Well, it's a huge market, and every channel out there has a different way of working. So, and they have different ways of getting in. So let's look at like programmatic, programmatic. So banners, ads, programmatic video content, things like that. They're all bought through a whole RDB process, right? So you have a DSP is where you buy the stuff kind of like a trade desk or a basis and stuff like that, where you can go in, you can put your order in as a client, right? You want to retarget your audience that's landing on your website. You can go into these platforms, build your campaigns, and then they go through an RTB, a real-time bidding process, and they connect to a bunch of SSPs, which is supply side partners. They contain tons and tons of publishers that have millions upon millions of different websites. Well, if they have a website that's getting advertisements through this channel, they can literally throw bot traffic at the different websites to drive in more volume, and they're getting paid for every click or every impression that's showing up on those pages. So it's very easy to, set up an account. Hey, you can set up a web page today, call it anything you want. Let's say you put something about a cybersecurity company, right? Hey, you try to promote, cybersecurity companies. So you write blogs about cybersecurity, all the new things that are happening. It picks up some volume because people are interested in the topic. They start going to your site. You develop an audience of, let's say, 100,000 people a month coming to your site to read up on latest trends in cybersecurity. Now, let's say you decide to go out and you're a legitimate publisher. You go out and say, hey, if I buy some cheap traffic that I got advertised to on the internet, I can drive cheap traffic to the site and I'll make more in revenue than the cost of the advertising. So it becomes like an arbitrage model. Well, cheap traffic is latent with fraud. Most people don't know this. It's
Hmm.
inexpensive. It's, cheap traffic, bot traffic costs nothing to generate. And, the unsuspecting publisher is now driving fraudulent traffic to a site without even knowing about it. So now he's making money, and then of course taking a percentage of that and paying the place where he's buying the traffic from. So the fraudsters start making money. And like I said, this can get really complex depending on the marketing channel. But every marketing channel has a way of generating that revenue.
Yeah, I see that from like YouTube. It's like I guarantee you a million likes in a week, and you see these farms, and they have 500 iPhones all plugged into the wall and massive racks, and so it's almost the same thing. You're just generating fake traffic. You're running up that advertising cost, but you're bringing no value. The actual ROI for it is zero, right? So
It's
you're
zero.
you're inducing fake data, fake ROI. You're hurting a lot of people, and everyone's marketing statistics are off, but the marketing company's still making a lot of money because there's just a lot of traffic that's happening, and that's how
Yep.
that is that their model. So do
Yeah.
they do that themselves, or you think they're in on it, or just the fraudsters are taking advantage of it, or
Well,
because it
I
would be
try to
in their
believe
own in.
I try to believe the good in everybody. So usually an agency is trying to build a business and grow a business. They're not trying to do anything fraudulently, but not knowing where their traffic is coming from is usually a big problem for most agencies. Like they're bringing in traffic from different sources and they don't have a great vetting process to, scan the traffic or to look at the traffic. So unbeknownst to them, they could be introducing this fraud problem to their clients without even knowing about it. So I think that's a lot. It's a big chunk of it, but there are obviously fraudsters out there that set up these, hey, come to us and buy, visitors for, 1/10 of a penny per visitor. So like for 1 penny, you can buy 10 visitors clicking on whatever you want them to click on. And on the back end, if you're making $1 a click, it's an easy ROI. So as an agency, it's hard to ignore that. Hey, let me try this traffic. And you send the traffic in. If the traffic is shaped correctly, the end advertiser doesn't really know it unless it becomes a big share of the volume that they're buying. But it's gotten so common that we're walking into people, we're doing traffic quality audits for them so we can identify how much of the traffic is fraudulent. And we're finding that they've got 20-25% fraud on average. And they're like, this makes a lot of sense once you start connecting the dots.
Wow. So 25% of you think of most people's traffic are bots. Like I see this on LinkedIn where the job postings that go out there, there's no way 100 people applied in 30 seconds. It was
Right.
just that fast. It's got to be bots that are doing that. That is skewing. And I opened up a job too. I had where I was going to do this vCISO. I needed a resource. I also had a chief technology officer position I needed to fill for a client, and I put it out there and received like 3,000 response towards it. And a lot of them weren't even legitimate. They didn't even have the right background. It was just set to apply to everyone, everything that comes out.
Yeah.
And so it made sense when you said, when we talked earlier, you were saying it was like 25% of this is fraudulent. I always want to know, how do I know that? I'm a cybersecurity intrusion detection guy, right? I'm thinking, okay, is it a certain pattern? I could set a web application firewall in front of it. What can I do to stop this type of fraud? But you already kind of have a solution you're working on for that. So what is your idea for how to combat this?
Well, I started working on this. I wrote the first version of this in 2005. So we're looking at 21 years ago. And it was very simple at the time. It was just checking to see if they had a mouse, right? Um, at the time, you couldn't spoof that data. Nobody was thinking about spoofing that. And I just had this brilliant idea to check for something that, because we didn't have touch screens at the point, everything was based on a mouse. So it was very easy. Does this device have a mouse? And if it was an emulator, it didn't. It was a server based, coming out of the server farm, it didn't have a mouse. And it was amazing how much fraud we caught. Then fraudsters got wise to what I was doing, and then they decided, okay, let's figure out how to, and they come up with a way to make it look like they have a mouse and renders my software for those people useless. So now, of course, you got to iterate. What else can I look at? And for the last 21 years, I've been identifying patterns that are just not real. And we're collecting so much data now. So when a visitor lands on your landing page, we're collecting over 800 data points. And we know exactly how those data points are supposed to look, how they interact with each other. And we have built a system that knows if that person is real or fake. And we actually, because now a year ago, I think it was last year, Q1, we announced a 99.999% accuracy rating when identifying somebody as fraud. Because what we found is there are a lot of solutions in the marketplace that try to do some type of fraud detection. Biggest problem we hear from clients that have been using or testing those solutions is that they have a high false positive rate. And based on feedback, we've estimated that the average fraud false positive rate is 15%. So could you imagine if you're trying to drive clients to your site and 15% of the time that your fraud solution says, hey, this is a bad user, they're wrong? That becomes very
Yeah.
costly. And you're knocking out real people. Our software is super accurate. That's why I guess that 5 nines accuracy allows us to be wrong once every 100,000 visitors. So it's very, very minimal. And usually when we catch those people, they're techies. They're people with the tools that could commit fraud. They're just maybe not committing fraud at that time, but we detect that they have the tools in their system to be able to do it. So yeah, maybe that's a false positive, and that's what the 5 nines accuracy is all about. But when you're looking at a solution, it's really about looking at a lot of data. As you know, in cybersecurity, the more data you have, the more patterns you can identify, the faster you can find types of fraud. We actually consider ourselves a subset of cybersecurity, but we're called cybersecurity for the web page, right? And that's really
Okay.
where we play.
That's interesting. I think, does that have a play also in banking and wire transfers and any other type of web application for fraudsters? Obviously, this is tuned towards ad fraud
Yeah,
specifically, but could that be
we
for enhanced authentication for online banking or something to that
yeah
effect?
we've done a huge study with ADP, big payroll processor. One of the problems they had were fraudsters were using bots to log into the platform, brute force to get into somebody's account. once they got into the account, they were changing the direct deposit location.
Account
So we were
takeover.
able to identify, we were able to do an identification on, should I let this person log into the account? So if they're a fraudster, and when I talk about fraudsters, I'm talking about bots, malware, or human fraud farms. So we can identify those, like I said, very accurately, and then we can tell you, hey, ADP, this guy is a fraudster and he's trying to log into your system. What do you want to do? And obviously, I don't want them to log in, so we can fail to log in.
Right.
We've done it for e-commerce sites. Should this person charge this credit card? Before because if it's a brand new stolen credit card, it's not going to be on any stolen credit card list. So those traditional fraud tools that say, hey, this credit card's already been reported stolen, it's not going to trigger that because it hasn't been reported stolen yet.
Hmm.
But we can identify that person's trying to hide themselves, right? Because they're not going to do it behind their own IP address, which is traceable. They're going to try to hide themselves, and when they do, that's when we catch them.
So tell me, when a customer has identified fraud in their advertising data, how hard is it to remove that and get what's the true impact of your? So you have, I think, one from a reporting perspective, but two, how do you just prevent those numbers from being injected into your ads in the first place? So part of this, how does your technology work? It sits on a web server, I'm assuming, and looks at the traffic going back and forth. So what's the architecture for it?
Yeah, so essentially for us, it's simple JavaScript. Everything's been done through JavaScript. It's the only way to collect all the data that we need. We need to basically touch the visitor so we can
Mhm.
collect all that information from them. And then using that data, you got two ways of looking at the data. You can look at the data through analytics, and then you can actually see what's bad, what's good on a visit by visit basis. You could take real time action, so you could do something with that visitor in real time. So if you got a visitor coming into your site, you know that they're fraudulent, you can send them to a different path. You can send them to a different website if you wanted to. You could block them from filling out forms, charging credit card. I mean, whatever it is, preventing them from logging into, your platform, whatever our client wants them to do. And we always say, okay, now that we know this person is fraudulent, what do you want to do with them?
I
And
know
we give
I
them some
want to.
options, right? But it's up to the client. It's really, I had one person, um, they would whatchamacallit, it was kind of interesting. They would post a phone number because they were trying to generate phone calls off the landing page. So they had, information on the site, they had a lead form they can fill out, they also had a phone number. Well, in real time, we could swap out that phone number to a totally different number and it goes through a different channel. And they were doing it because they wanted to talk to the fraudsters and find out,
Yeah.
what's going on. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you hacking? Like, it was just almost like a personal project that they wanted to do. And hey, our technology was able to set up and do that with no problem.
That's where my mind goes. I would duplicate the infrastructure, and if I can route them to it. When I was at FishMe, one of the coolest things we would do is that we'd have these phishing campaigns get reported. They would hit the button, little report fish button, and would come to our phishing defense center. We'd pull it apart and so forth. But we'd find these credential harvesters. They're asking for the username and password. They're asking for all this stuff. And we see this phishing email. But we had this script that would actually take this database repository we had full of fake names that were used for testing data, for coding different things. And we just started applying and with a curl script and just started flooding that attacker's mailbox with all these fake credentials. So yes, he might have gotten one or two of our customers real credentials, but we just flooded them with 8,000 more to the point he had to turn his mailbox off.
Mhm.
And how do you filter through that? How do you kind of poison that data that they receive? So that's
Yeah,
always a challenge.
sure.
So I would say I would take your fraudsters and say if I can identify them on the front end, I would love to send them to a dev environment and just collect intelligence on them. What are they doing? At least they're in this environment over here and they're not on your production system.
Yeah.
Um, or you could
We
just
had
block them and not care, right? So
most of our clients are like, just prevent them from, let them go somewhere else. And it's kind of like, the old ADT commercials, right? You put the ADT sign in your yard and
yeah,
somebody's going to come and break it and like, you know what? I know ADT. I don't want to even try. I'm just going to go to the guy next door. Right. And that's kind of what's becoming a lot about our platform. We go to a lot of shows where fraudsters attend, um, because the people that are there, 80% of the people are trying to get around our system. The other 20% of people we can really help. And we've had people come up to us and say, "Oh my God, you're making my life miserable." And we'd ask them like, "What do you mean?" And it's like, "Well, I can't get around your software, and it's costing me money." And I'm like, well, "That's the job of the software." And they're blatant enough to walk around these trade shows and talk about it. It's
yeah.
amazing.
And this is a question I have for you, Rich. Is advertising fraud illegal?
As far as I know, there's no written law on the books that says it's illegal.
That's my biggest. So it's hard to call it fraud if it's not illegal, but it's eating up a service and consuming it on a fraudulent pretense.
Yeah.
So technically is illegal, right? I don't know. It's just really interesting here. They could say, well, it's not. I'm trying to drive advertising for something else. I'm being creative. I'm not
Yeah,
fraudulently
there's
trying to
laws that
do
they'll
anything.
use for like what international stuff, and there's laws that they use like if they catch somebody, there's things that they'll try to use other laws to go against them. But to typically, if you look at a law that talks about ad fraud as being illegal, and again, really, it's most of the illegal activity happens overseas. So now you have to have Interpol involved, and you have to have those laws in effects. And then a lot of these fraudsters know they can set up their fraud farms in countries that don't care about our laws.
Mm,
There's a lot of places. I mean, Palau is one of the probably the most famous ones that they'll let you do anything over there. So they have hosting facilities over there that allow you to do anything you want, and
mm.
they don't abide by any country's law.
And I take yours says it from an architecture perspective. I would put you in front of whatever marketing solution I would have, regardless of what's in the back end. You're just a web server in front that would determine whether something is a bot or not, and then would pass on to the legitimate. So if I decided to change my marketing provider in the back end, whatever that platform I'm going to
Mhm.
use, yours is essentially a proxy or web application firewall sitting in the front of it that gives um, greater data quality on the users that are driving the advertising mechanism. So you're guaranteeing these are real people versus some bot, and that's really your benefit there is ensuring that those are real people that are coming across, right?
Yeah. And it's, there's a lot of competitors that do a lot of different things in this space. And it's like different analytic packages and all this other stuff. The problem is fraud is a full-time job. Like staying on top of that, we're like best in class. If we're going to use our system, it's all about making sure. So it doesn't matter where you're getting your traffic from. You add sources, remove sources. We sit right in the front and we can tell you based on the data being passed to us where it's coming from, what percentage of fraud it is. Pretty much give you basically a scorecard on all your sources of traffic, all your campaigns, and we can
Mm,
drill down at that level. And then a lot of times we'll get people ask us, all right, well, how do you know this is fraud? Because I don't have any clients complaining about it, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll go into our dashboard and we'll pull up some reports and prove to them beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's fraud. I'll give you a good example. I had a client. Um, they were with us for a couple of years. They left us because there was another company that was a few dollars cheaper. But some massive AI attack happened last year, and as far as I know, we're the one of the only, if not the only, solution that solved it so far. We put a big press release about it in January of this year, and so I reached out to him just to say, "Hey, did your new vendor catch this new fraud?" And he's like, "You know what? We need to talk." So he ran another test and he goes, "How are you catching so much more fraud than the other guys?" I'm like, "This is what we do. This is all we do. We don't have other features and other products that we have. We have one product to worry about is making sure we find the fraud faster than anybody else." He goes, "Well, how do you know you're right? Maybe this is false positives. Prove me to be on the shadow of a doubt." So we sat down, we pulled data reports, and we were able to show him in the reporting data that all of the data that was coming from mobile phones that were all being controlled by a single MacBook Pro. And I'm like, and he goes,
there you
"Okay,
go.
send me paperwork." And it's once you have the proof, because again, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of my competitors in the marketing space that just put on snake oil. Like they don't really have a solution. They just, I actually had a customer come to me. He was a very technical guy. He was a CTO of a company, and he's like, "All right, my CEO or my CMO asked me to validate your solution." He goes, "I just validated 3 or 4 other solutions, and they were horrible." And I go, "What's your validation?" He goes, "You really want to know my validation?" He goes, "I'll tell you after I do the test." And he goes, "Okay, fine, do the test." So he runs the test. Now, a lot of my competitors will score traffic on a score basis of 0 to 100. 100 being blockage, 0 being is totally clean traffic.
Mm.
But they'll tell you once it breaches 70, that's typically what most of them say, that's enough for them to be convinced it's fraud. It's 70% likely to be fraud. Well, my question is always, well, if 70% likely to be fraud, what about the other 30%? Is it likely to be real? So therein lies false positives. That's how they're created. For us, it's either good or it's bad. You're hiring us to be your fraud solution. We're going to give you an honest answer and tell you exactly what's going on. So his test was very simple. He says, all right, this is what I did. I took the same information, the same visitor, and I pinged this system 1,000 times. And he goes, I got scores all over the place. They were up and down. They were, sometimes it was high, sometimes it was low. It was just all over the place. And he goes, that's not a real solution. If it's the same information, should be the same score. He goes, I did your score, and it came back the same score every time. He goes,
Mm,
so at least I know you're consistent. He goes, now I'm going to run another test to validate the validity of your data. But he goes, at least I know you're consistent. So that beats the other guys that I've tested. So this is the kind of stuff we run into. So a lot of times we run into people that have unfortunately messed with a cheaper solution, and they apply it and they start following the advice and they don't see a benefit. In fact, there's a famous one with Uber. Uber was using a fraud solution, took their advice, and didn't help, didn't make a change. And it was because the solution they were using had high false positives. So if they're mismarking real people as fraud, they're also mismarking fraud as real people. So it
mm.
doesn't really solve the problem. With our technology, the proof is in the pudding. If you apply our technology, you'll see a lift in ROAS. And as soon as you start seeing that, it's just not numbers in the data. It's just not, snake oil. It's something that's giving some real information. Like I said, I built this for myself, my last company. My last company, Zang, did over $100 million in sales. And we were only able to do that and last for 20 years as a company because we had this solution in place to eliminate the garbage.
Yeah. And I find that in some of the poorly implemented AI models, they don't have repeatability decision making. So if you used a model for something and you use some AI capabilities and it doesn't come up with the same answer, just like you're talking about, if you can't run the same scenario twice and the model come up with the same answer, or it comes up with something totally different every time you run it, there's no predictability, there's no assurance that this is working properly. Can't even get to the same answer. I did like that a lot about Anthropic's model, how it kind of showed you the thought pattern and so forth, but other models don't. So do you just find that some of these av guys implement some machine learning or AI just horribly, and that's why you have such poor results on some of these fraudsters, or what are your thoughts?
Some of them just implement technology and just they go off and they're just focusing on selling a product. Because if you have a really good sales process and a good sales team, you can sell anything to anybody, right? That's just how it is. The trick is in my space is building a really good product that people can actually feel the difference when you apply it. And yeah, so I've looked at other technologies. I know a lot of companies in the space, and sometimes it's a matter of just having too many people working on the project, and one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, and they're building something, and one guy's code is conflicting with another guy's code, but they don't know that until it gets merged and put into a platform, and everybody thinks their stuff is working, but too many hands in the cookie jar sometimes is not a good thing.
Yeah,
We have a small controlled team that has been working together for decades. I've been lucky to have our team of developers been together for so like I hate to say it's like a football team, right? When a football team works together as a team with the same players for long periods of time, they learn each other's moves and they anticipate each other's moves and they become a better team as a overall. Same thing with us. We have a very small team, but that team is very comfortable with each other and they understand each other's moves, and it just makes for a better product.
that's great. And that is definitely part of, I've been in software companies, I've been in technology companies my whole career. And that kind of cohesion of thought and strategy and execution and having a solid team, that is a key to this. Having people coming in and out, you got a new CTO, you got a new person here, it just never works out right. But having a solid team that understands the mission and they're driving towards that, I think that's a phenomenal thing. It's a
Yeah.
phenomenal thing. And so when I look at, okay, so fraud in the online is all about identifying who that person is. Is it legitimate? We have the same problem in cybersecurity. We have the same problem in, like we were talking about, in job boards on LinkedIn. There's no way 1,000 people applied to that job in the second that it's been out there. And so these bots are going to be a problem moving forward. How do you use AI on the back end, but on the front end, it's causing some massive issues. So tell me this from your Your pricing model, how do I work with that? I implement your solution before my marketing. I just add it into the package. Sounds like a best way to approach that. But kind of how does a customer consume your solution?
So essentially, we have package prices. So depending on the volume of visitors we're going to scan will depend on the price. The more visitors we scan, the cheaper the per scan gets. So it scales really nicely. Especially we have some clients that do billions of requests a month, and obviously, if they were spending a lot per request, it gets cost prohibitive. So it's got to be cost effective for different levels. So we've come up with a game plan over the last couple of years that's been working really well. And a lot of people, they just part of their tech stack. It's cheap enough. We focus on people that are spending. The more they spend, the bigger the ROI. So we always try to show the ROI. Like, hey, let's say you're spending, I don't know, 50 grand a month in digital marketing. We know that 25% of that on average is going to be, fraud. That's 12,500 bucks. We come in for a fraction of that to solve that problem. It makes sense. The ROI is there. Um, and that's just kind of how the pricing model is built. And the whole idea is like, then you have customers that are spending tens of millions a month. The ROI is a lot higher because it's just, we don't scale like that. Like, it's just not how we build our product. It's the more volume they commit to us, the more money they're making as a company. Our system doesn't scale like that crazy because we want to get the big brands. We want to show that the product is good. And since we've been going in that direction, the big brands have been falling in, and just, you've got a different process with closing big brands. The procurement issue, time frame takes time, and this from cybersecurity.
Yeah,
The bigger brands take time, but once you're in and you get passed through procurement, they're there for a long time.
definitely a longer sales cycle. I saw that just recently with a LinkedIn boost I did. So I had where I do Azure security assessments, cloud incident response, and vCISO, right? So I'm going to boost one of these ads, and it said it had 38,000 impressions. To really mean that 38,000 people saw that, or does that really mean something different? So I've always been
Well, that's
distrustful.
an attribution question, really, right? Because
Mm.
what you're looking at is 38,000 impressions. Somebody's scrolling through their feed. Whoop, you pass by. That was an impression.
Or
And
bots
technically,
aren't bots just scrolling through anyway? Right.
yep,
So could it be bots that are just scrolling through and hit that, and that's where my ad impression goes up? And I
it
don't know,
could be it too.
just
It's
really
it's all over
interesting.
the place. It's all over the place, and it's crazy because I always talk about this. Right now, we say the average is about 25%. There and abouts, right? 25% fraud. At what percentage of fraud would shut down digital marketing? And people always look at me like I'm like, look, if 100% of that $750 billion was fraud, who would spend money on it? You would have no conversions, you'd have no back end results. It would just collapse itself. Okay, but it doesn't have to get to 100%. What number does it have to reach before the whole system just starts to shut down on itself? I don't know what the number is. I don't know what the answer is, right? But there is a number between where we are today and 100. Somewhere in that middle is going to be a number where people just decide it's not worth advertising on all these channels because they're just not worth it.
Yeah. Well, tell me
So
this,
I
is the
always,
ROI calculator. Obviously, you would say, I'm going to take that 25% of bot traffic and I'm not going to add that back in. So my cost per impression or whatever is going to be lower because I'm now more effective. Instead of those 25 percent of bots, I'm going to be able to pull them off. Does it show, like your ROI would show an increase in sales to correspond to that, right? Not only do I have a increase in quality of users, but your ROI, and they would reduce that, but your ROI should be you have increase of sales from that same effort if done in the same manner. Obviously, can't change the campaign up and do it completely different. But technically, if you ran the same campaign with the bots out, your ROI for sales conversion should go up because the quality of the sales qualified lead just went up. And of
right.
course,
So essentially, what the way we look at it is most of our customers, some of our customers want to just shave it off and reduce their budget, right? Not all, most of our customers want to basically take that 25%, that audience of 25% that's never going to convert, stop giving it to them, give it to the audience that's going to convert. And I think I did the math one time, and if you just do 25% reduction, move it into the production, it should see a lift in 37.5% ROI, if I remember my numbers correctly. So you see
wow.
a nice lift in ROI. And The only difference is they're just deploying our technology. So it really depends on, I mean, I've got stories after stories. Like I'll give you a nice story. We had a customer come. I was working with them for a long time. I was on the board with one of their VPs, and he talked about, what did you do? Oh, it might be good for our company. So we started talking, and I want to say I was talking about it for years. I think 2, 3 years, something like that. We were talking about it, and I couldn't get them to try the traffic quality audit. And it was just, oh, we've got developer issues. We don't have time on the development cycle. And I'm like, you can literally deploy our technology in 3 minutes using Google Tag Manager. It's that simple. It's pre-built into Google Tag Manager. You select a code, you put in your ID, hit submit, and you're done. Right? Simple. But it's always the runaround that you get. Especially because otherwise, if they like it, then they got to take on another project, and so it was a hassle. And then one day I hit him up. I'm like, all right, are we ready for the traffic quality audit? And all of a sudden he goes, yes. I'm like, okay, what happened? Because the only way things have changed is something's changed on their end. And it turned out they just lost two of their biggest clients. And they said because traffic quality is way down over the last 6 months or a year, whatever it was. And he goes, I'm wondering if this is fraud related. I go, I can almost guarantee it's fraud related. I said, this is kind of what happens. When I've done so many traffic quality audits over the last 9 years that we've been running this product as a standalone product, I have kind of had that feeling of where things sit. So if you're at 5% or less fraud, which is very few people that I've come across, it kind of goes unnoticed, right? Because it's less than 5%. It's kind of people kind of chalk it
Mm.
up as the cost of doing business, whatever. Once it breaches 10%, people start to notice something's not right, but they can't put their finger on it and they don't know what to search for. So it becomes that trickiness of, what could it be? Like, my numbers are down, maybe it's the trap, maybe it's the ad, maybe it's the create, something's not right, and they just can't put their finger on it. Once it breaches 20%, the sky's falling. Like, they know, all right, their campaigns are shit in the bed. If they're selling that traffic to customers aren't happy. They know there's a problem, and that's when they start frantically looking for a solution. So when this guy hit me up, I'm like, yeah, there's something going on. I go, I'm going to bet you north of 20%, because if you're feeling it, you already lost two big clients that have been with you for something's going on. We ran the traffic quality audit. He had 65% fraud. I said, dude, you're in danger of losing your company. Like, is that close? And he goes, you have no idea. We've already started going down those decisions. What do we do? I said, well, generally speaking, you followed my advice. We can cut that fraud in half within 90 days, because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to do. And we'll work with you side by side. That's how we are. We're more like a partner than a vendor. And we were actually able to get them. We had some nice low hanging fruit we were able to knock off pretty quick. And we got them, I think we got them under 30% in 5 weeks. It was a major win for them. And then it took time to get, to whittle down the rest of that. But that first 5 weeks, he got calls from his next group of clients saying, I don't know what you did. Things look so much better. Keep doing that. Increase my budget. And that locked him in as a client for life. And years later, maybe another 2 years later, after, working this process with them and getting their fraud, I think their fraud's under 5% right now. I had the VP of marketing come up and say, you basically saved our company. We were literally going down the path of shutting down until we deployed your technology. So we're
Wow.
Anura clients for life. I mean, that's
It looked like they
that's
were
just
absolutely infected with fraudsters on their platform. So that's why I find it interesting here in this space, because there's such an impact. Like, I can harden a firewall or several hosts in a network, and what you're doing is preventive from something happening in the future. But actually being able to stop fraudsters here by eating up the effectiveness of your marketing campaign and just kind of ruin your statistics and your business model. And you really don't know that they're and those parasites. I thought that's phenomenal. Now, tell me, from a Venn diagram perspective, do you think the same people who are fraudulent using bots in these advertising schemes, are they the same ones who are doing cybercrime and ransomware? Or do you think these are separate groups of sophistication and they don't even touch each other?
well, let me ask you a question, because that's a good question. I'm going to bet they're slightly different disciplines, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're within the same company or entity, a fraud group, where one group of guys are focusing on ad fraud, and committing ad fraud.
Yeah.
Another group of guys are committing on ransomware. What
Like a
is,
gang would do that, right? You would, if
yeah,
you're a
so
drug dealer, do you just sell one drug or do you sell five different drugs? and have
But you might
different
have
people.
specialists. You might have specialists. Some people that just focus on the lighter drugs, and some people focus on the hardest. Again, it's
Yeah,
hard to know. Um,
the different skill
I'll give you an
sets.
example. I met a guy who, and it was the most interesting thing. He said he went backpacking through Europe, and he figured he would just wait tables and stuff for money here and there. He took enough money for a couple weeks, and he figured out I'll work some part-time jobs that would make a few bucks, and just he spent like I want to say 6 months overseas just finding himself, seeing what he was before he went to college. He just wanted that time to himself. And he was staying with a host family, and the host family, one of the kids in the family was his age. And he says, "What are you going to do for money?" He says, "Well, I'm going to go wait some tables and stuff like that." He goes, "No, no, no, no. You got to come work with me. I have this place to pay you a lot more money, and it's a very easy job. We sit at a computer all day." He says, "All right." So he went there, and he described the whole thing. And he goes, "I know what it was. It was a click farm. We were
Mm,
looking at ads, clicking on ads, committing fraud." And he goes, "There was a sea of like 400 people in this room. We're on these tiny little desks, lumped on top of each other. It was just an old rickety building." But he goes, "I was told to look at ads, click on ads, and they gave me a process of what I needed to do. And because bot detection, which a lot of my competitors talk about, won't catch human fraud farms,
mm,
because the bots do certain things, humans do things other. Like, the biggest thing is, what does Google have? Captures, right? They put up these captures, click all the bicycles. Well, a human can do that. I mean, AI can do that now too, but back then humans could do that. Bots could
yeah,
not. So, I mean, he literally sat. So going back to that one entity was focused on one type of fraud just because it's so profitable.
yeah. Well, I figure it's just like any criminal entity. You have different ones or conglomerates, and some are
Different
organized, some are
specialties. Yep.
disorganized,
Oh, yeah.
and so forth. But that's always a real fascinating world. Well, Rich, I really appreciate your time today, man. I think it was fascinating diving in the world of advertising fraud. A lot of the people you're dealing with, you said, are like the CMOs or the chief marketing people. They're not rarely the cybersecurity people, but seeing where this just is the same group of people, just a different flavor of cybercrime than the ransomware attack I just had to deal with about a week ago. So it's really always fascinating. So where else can we know more about you and your company and your website, and how do we know more about you, Rich?
Sure, I'm all over LinkedIn. LinkedIn's my social media of choice. I enjoy it because there's no politics on there, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's just more professional in business. So Rich Kahn, you can easily find me there. You can go to Anura.io, Anura.io, for more information on our company and stuff. But one thing I highly recommend your audience to do, if you're spending money on digital marketing, come to our site and sign up for a free traffic quality audit, because you need to know what you're dealing with. You can't solve a problem you don't know about. So let's at least get some data around it. In our free traffic quality audit, you also get, not only do you find out how much fraud you're dealing with, but we tell you where it's coming from. So at least you have that information on with that information.
That is awesome. That's great to know. So Rich has that free traffic assessment. Everybody else, please follow us on the show. Really hit that like and subscribe button. Put your comments in. Anything about this show, Rich and I are going to respond to it in the comments. And see you following Cybersecurity America shortly. Sure. So have a good evening and stay secure.
Thank you.